So our presenter today is Dwayne Celestin. He is a brother from New Orleans or Loyola, New Orleans. He has conducted searches for senior leaders across a range of firms and industries, and his clients have included Fortune 500 firms, family-owned businesses, private equity-backed firms, and universities. He has coached leaders to help them realize their career goals and improve their productivity. He also supports young people, like many of you on the call, by speaking to students and actively mentoring and supporting high school students. As part of his work, he has also published 4 books, including Recruiter's Guide to Hiring Diverse Leaders and Your Hired Actions to Get and Keep the Dream Job of Your Dreams. So I will turn it over to you, Dwayne.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, and good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it happens to be where you are. I've modified the title a little bit from the original submission because after thinking it through, it's really achieving alignment to secure career success. And so what we'll have here are about 15-20 minutes of content before questions, but the goal is to give you something you can put to use immediately. Just a little bit about me. Heather did a great job, but I think a couple of things. I lead our global diversity practice. About 70% of our placements are diverse, and the way we define diversity in our company are women globally and women and people of color in the US. And I have clients across a whole host of industries. Some of these logos you'll recognize, perhaps a John Deere, a Xerox, American Family, and some that are large companies that you may not, but a wide range of types of clients, which keeps it interesting. Before I became a recruiter, I spent a lot of time in corporate America where some of the things that I'll be sharing with you today were honed and improved through being a subordinate, being a supervisor, and then leading a department. And having done work where I had large teams of 100, 110 people, large budgets, these techniques were proven to be very helpful because different levels of people, but always having a supervisor subordinate relationship, myself and with others on my team. As mentioned, I also do some executive coaching and written a lot on the subject. And I've been a member of Delta Sigma Pi for about 40 years now. So now to the subject at hand and a poll question. Can you just quickly share where you fit on the career journey? Are you a student, early career, mid-career, or more well-established? Great. Thank you very much. More of a mid-career kind of model. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. And this, I don't think that changes no matter where you are. This still works. I used it, and you'll see CEOs have used it as well. So the purpose is alignment. It's really about alignment. It's when you think about what your leadership needs and what you're contributing to the organization. That is the key. So everyone has a supervisor. You know, I've just placed a CEO for an organization, and their supervisor happens to be the board. And for everyone else, we tend to have a direct supervisor who handles our reporting relationship, does our personnel reviews, what have you. From the CEO standpoint, the outputs are fairly well known and clear. You know, it's really the plan that they've subsequently shared to the board, and if they're a public company, to external stakeholders. They break that out into quarterly chunks. And every quarter, not only do they share this with the marketplace, they have meetings with the board to understand and align, well, how are we performing relative to those metrics? When you think about an individual in an organization, regardless of size, the total organization still has its annual goals. Each department has a contributing component to those annual goals. Then the team, if the department is large or in a larger organization, has a piece. The supervisor owns that piece at some point, in some role in the organization. And then subsequently, that cascades down to you, the individual. So you can see you can be an individual in many parts of the organization, but you still have a subset of what the organization is doing, from the CEO to everyone else. And then it rolls back up. So from you to your supervisor, etc. So for success, it's important to be aligned with your supervisor. And there are a number of reasons why. If you have two employees on your team, and one is doing their own thing, they're doing what they think is right, but they're just doing their own thing. And you have another that's doing the things that align with what the department needs from the supervisor's perspective. Clearly, the latter employee is the preferred employee, no matter how good that other person is on so many dimensions. Because if they're doing things that are not contributing to what the supervisor needs for the team, in most instances, that's going to be less attractive. Okay, so that's the premise. So think about it. If you're reporting to the CEO or you're reporting to many other leaders in the company, you're still one of many. So let's take the CEO's seat. They have a CFO, a CIO, the general counsel, the chief marketing officer, to name a few. So that would be 4 direct reports, and many have 7 or more. Many supervisors in organizations have as few as 2 to 3 direct reports, but some have as many as 14. And then they have people that report to them. So from the context of the supervisor is really important. They have a lot of people that they are responsible for. They have their own goals and objectives. So you can't assume that they know everything you've done over the last 7 days or several weeks, because they would need to know that for a whole host of people. So that's a very important perspective. Don't assume that your supervisor is fully aware of what you've done since the last time you've met. With that as a starting point, this is the first part of a very simple 1-page document that can really be powerful in alignment with your supervisor. So the first thing is, we meet with our supervisors at varying cadences. Some people meet with their supervisor every day or every other day, and some once a month or once a quarter. It just depends on the scope of the role and the nature of your relationship, and sometimes what you're working on. Because if you're working on a big project that's due in a week, there may be a daily cadence to get that project or that presentation completed. I get that. But we're thinking about what's happening when you have a more typical every week, every other week kind of cadence of meeting with your supervisor. So call it the 45 weeks of the year, not the 7 where you have a special situation. So in those regular weeks of the year, and let's say you meet with your supervisor every other week, you can't assume they know what you did for those 2 weeks. I think that's a faulty assumption. So let's go in with the assumption, hey, supervisor, I want to recap for you the 3 to 5 major things that I've accomplished or my team has accomplished since last we met. So this is a nice refresher for your supervisor of the things that you've invested your time in over this last period. Very clean, very simple. Now, the reason why we say 5 is because we don't need to have, hey, I completed an expense report or some of those types of administrative activities. These are the value added things that you want your supervisor to know you took care of, you advanced meaningfully since last you've met. Okay? The next thing you want to do, which is even more powerful than what I have done, is what I plan to do and when I plan to get that accomplished. So these are the 5 things you plan to accomplish between now and the next meeting. Call it 2 weeks from now, where you have your one-on-one with your supervisor. So what you want to do is prioritize the items that you will accomplish over that. And then you have a timing, because some things you may complete in a day, some things you may complete in a week, some things may take longer, what have you. But this isn't a visual that you're sharing with your supervisor of how you plan to spend your time or that of your team over the coming time frame. Let's stick with 2 weeks. So by thinking about your plan of action, you're helping your supervisor to do one of 3 things. You're sharing with them what you've done, what you plan to do, and when you plan to do it. What you've done, what you plan to do, and when you plan to do it. The reason those things are so powerful is now your supervisor is in a position to say one of 3 things about your future state. What's gone past is gone past. I mean, they can debate, or you can discuss, well, how well you did what you did. Is it complete? Are there additional steps? Those kinds of things. But going forward, your supervisor will say, hey, I like what you plan to do in your time frame. Or they can say, I like what you plan to do, but this project is really the number 1 priority I need from you and your group, as opposed to the number 3 priority, for example. They can say, I also want this item changed in timing. You know, this item that you have as number 2 is really my number 5. And frankly, if you don't accomplish it in 2 weeks, that's okay, because I really would like to see these other 4 prioritized. Or they can say, you're missing an item that I think you/your team should be focused on for this next period of time. And that is the eye opener. That you're working on things, but not including something your supervisor deems important. So you can now see how this enables you to align with your supervisor, because your supervisor is going to say, wait, you're missing project B. Project B should be on your list. Or they may say, hey, I just learned that project B is cascaded down from my supervisor. So now that's my priority, and you have a piece of it, of the whole project. But now you're aligned. Now you realize, oh, I have to shoehorn project B. So supervisor, what would you like for us to demote? What becomes a lower priority? You see how that's a high quality communication you have with your supervisor? How now you're not just out doing activities, but you're doing activities that are most important from your supervisor's perspective. And oh, who does your review? Your supervisor. Oh, what have I done over the course of a period of time? Well, it's in my document. So here are the things that I've done. Oh, supervisor, I shared those with you. So now you are also building a tool by which, when your review comes, you and your supervisor can use as input for your review. So that 1-page document, I call it an alignment enabler, because it's a vehicle for great discussions. It keeps everyone current. You and your supervisor are current on what you've been doing, what you plan to do, the scope of what you plan to do, and the time frame which you plan to complete it. You enable them to really weigh in on your activities. You provide a means of clarity, because are you framing the project in the way they would like it framed? Is it too broad, too narrow? You're giving yourself an opportunity to really understand what the priorities are for your supervisor, and therefore your priorities, because your priorities are their priorities. Your job is to always make your supervisor look good. The CEO wants the board to look great. Board made a great decision hiring me. The board made a great decision on this plan. The board made a great decision on how they plan to invest the resources of the organization. The same holds true for each level. Your team supervisor is doing a fantastic job. Well, your team is a subset, is a function of the people on that team. So if there are any thoughts or questions, this would be a great time to have those.
And people can feel free to unmute themselves and or show their video or put their questions in the chat, and Dwayne will answer those for us.
While you're pondering your thoughts, in one instance, when I first created this, I was a manager, so I had a team member, and my supervisor was off on a McKinsey project, so I reported to the vice president. So the vice president had a whole host of people that he was responsible for at the time. So I knew there was no way he would know or possibly even care what I had accomplished or what I planned to do. But what it enabled me to do is say, hey, here are the things my small but mighty team accomplished, and here's what we plan to do. And it was an easy way for him to weigh in at 1,000 feet, 10,000, whatever. He was just so far broader scope than my role to say, yeah, you're working on the right things, but I really need you working on this. And if you can get to these other things, good for you, but here are a few things I really need. So it made it easy for him in that instance to give me direction and to make sure I wasn't drifting too far away from what was really important for our group and how we rolled up into his bigger group. So that was how I used it, but I've used it at different levels when I was more senior, as well as other opportunities when I was in the middle of the organization and had many supervisors and one or more levels of subordinates.
So we do have a couple of questions coming in.
Okay.
Dwayne, the first one is, what advice do you have for someone when their boss rarely has one-on-one meetings? And how do you handle that with hybrid work?
So separate questions. So one, you always want to fight for a one-on-one with your supervisor. Whether in the case of a supervisor that rarely has them, that means they value that time differently than you might. So I think when you use this type of tool that I shared, it enables you to make that a very productive meeting for the supervisor. Supervisors like productive meetings. They don't like to waste a lot of time, particularly if you have a large scope. You know, if you have 7 or more direct reports, the last thing you need are additional meetings that are not productive. So if you're in one of those situations where you're one of many people who reports to your supervisor, they may view those meetings as unproductive for them. So by using this tool, and maybe sending it to them in advance and say, hey, can I get 15 minutes to cover this, you know, what I've done and what I have on my plate to do, you might get the 15 minutes. And sometimes 15 minutes is all you need for them to react, and then you're aligned and you move on. So I would encourage you to think about it that way. Second question, Heather?
Well, she also asked about how you handle that with hybrid work.
Hybrid work is no different, I don't think. Hybrid being sometimes on-site, sometimes remote. I think you can do this whether you're in person or not. It's really around what activities did you accomplish, what things did you accomplish, and what will you plan to accomplish? So whether you're in the same office space or working in different cities, this still is a tool that can be used for that purpose.
Okay, and then we have another question. She says, thank you. Another question from Carmela. How does one handle multiple competing priorities?
Well, that's the whole notion of prioritization. Um, Contrary to popular belief, this whole multitasking thing is overrated. So, what you have to do is say, and this is where um, you develop different skills, right? Again, thinking of the CEO, they can always claim, I have multiple A priorities. You know, I have my customers, I have my shareholders, I have my board, I have, and the list goes on. The reality is, as a leader, one has to make trade off decisions, and multiple things have to be accomplished in a time frame. But the leader is the person who says, yes, I have multiple priorities, but this is my number one thing that I have to get done within this time frame, on down to your top 3 to 5 items. That is something that you must do as a leader. And the people who do those things well continue to advance their careers. And so, despite having a variety of people who are clamoring for your time and resources and energy, you have to prioritize what is really important based on your organization, what you need to accomplish over the next quarter or month, and then back that into, what do I need to do today? And that is a skill that you need to continually work on. If you think back to your student days, you have multiple classes, you have tests on the same day, you have activities for Delta Sig, and you have a part-time job. The tests are going to happen on Friday. It's Wednesday afternoon. Got to get it all done. So you figured it out. Do I work later? Do I party less? Whatever. But I've got to get all this stuff done. And you know, I don't want to make light of it, but you've had that part of the journey in school. And similarly, as I described with the CEO or any other role in the company, there will be, you know, some of us have matrix environments. So we report to different leaders. You have your functional leader, you have your project leader, you have the business unit that you're part of. So you may have 3 different people saying, hey, here are the priorities that I'd like you to pursue, based on their view of your role in the organization. And I get that that's can be a dilemma with multiple people giving you direction. But again, everybody's looking for their piece to get accomplished. And so you've got to then say, well, there are other levels of requests that have to get pushed down based on the requirements from the people you report to in this matrix world, which is very common for many organizations. Of the organizations I'm working with now, it's incredible how much matrix management is the way of the day. And part of that matrix is responsibility without authority. So you can't really, you know, it's not as clear on who's on first and who's giving direction, but the work has to be done. And I think by using a tool like this, it's helpful sometimes for you to think about all of your output that's required and how to prioritize that. And then realize that some of the things you want to do are just not nearly as leadership would like for you to do. Hopefully that was helpful. Long answer, but it can be a complex scenario for us in the matrix world.
So I have a question. Because your approach is very proactive versus reactive. And I guess my question is, if you are a supervisor or a manager, how can you encourage your direct reports to be more proactive and do these sorts of things?
Well, you know, that's a great question, because again, most of us are in some version of middle management, right? We're not at the entry level, and we're not leading the entire entity. So we're somewhere in between. And so there are 1 or 2 or more that work on our team, and who knows how many supervisory levels above us. So I think what I used to do was I tried to have a meeting with my team to outline a version of what I share with you. And you can see how this can be a 10-minute part of your staff, have staff meetings. And if let's say you have 5 people, and you can just share, this would be helpful for me and helpful for you as a vehicle, so we're all on the same page. So it enables you to really have a win-win kind of presentation to your team of, here's what will help me, because as you can see, I have 5 of you, but what you guys don't see, I work with these cross-functional teams as well. And so there are a whole host of other folks that I work with in addition to you guys. So it's just so much more helpful if you share with me kind of the things you've accomplished. And what's really helpful is going forward, the things you plan to work on and when you plan to complete them, because your input links with other people and it helps to see when the whole picture comes together. So that could be a way to outline that. And one thing I used to do is, by doing it for my supervisor, I shared mine with them so they could see, oh, you plan to do that, Dwayne. Oh, well, I have a piece of one of those projects on your to-do list. So clearly that's something that I roll up into that project. So I own a piece of you accomplishing that by the end of the week. So that way it was a helpful tool to help my team to see, oh yeah, that's right, you shared that we did this, and oh, that was mine, because I might have Jane or John may have completed a piece of my team's work, so it wasn't all what I personally did. It's kind of a recap of what our team did. And so some of the recaps would be some individual on the whole piece of a chunk. So it would be, hey, one of the team members accomplished this thing since last we met. And perhaps a project might be owned by one person. Say like you, Heather, you're responsible for making sure the webinar goes off smoothly. So, so that's your holistic, you may own that whole piece of work, and it's not 4 other people on the team involved in that at all. So, that rolls up, that will happen. And then the next time that did happen, it went without a hitch, everything was smooth, and Heather did a great job, and it was all what it was supposed to be. So I think that could be a way to help you and help your team at the same time by using the tool.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have any other questions they would like to ask? I didn't see any more in the chat.
Great questions, and thank you so much, and I'm glad to be a part, and hopefully this will be beneficial for you and others as they watch this webinar. Great to be a part.
Yes, thank you so much, Dwayne. And thank you everybody for attending.